Yeah.
It was more PTSD than, what he went through after he got out.
So is it more it's done as a documentary or is it done as
No,
a
no, it's
feature?
like a docudrama.
Uh huh.
I can't remember what it was called, but Ruth would remember it. It was good and based on true stories.
Very nice.
There you go.
Very nice.
As soon as you get here, get about three more sips.
All right. Well, coffee before Shabbos is very important. I'm gonna get started.
So intimate.
Well, it's raining. For those who are coming out in the rain, we say, our intrepid in-person folks, thank you for being here. For those who are going to watch on the Zoom, we thank you for being here. And we are going to begin to remember that though it's cold and wet on the outside, it's cold and dry in this part of the historic building on the inside. That's why it's nice we're not in the upstairs part for today. So we're going to begin this service, Parashat Kedoshim. We are at the heart of the Torah, we're in the middle of the third book. Couldn't be more at the center. And this is what it's all about. It's about Kedoshim Tihiyu. We should all be holy. Join with me as we begin on page 61, and thank God for the gift of this day. Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechazarta b'nishmati v'chemla, v'chemla rabba emunatecha. Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechazarta b'nishmati v'chemla, v'chemla rabba emunatecha, rabba emunatecha, rabba emunatecha. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenatecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenatecha Yisrael. We woke up this morning. We were able to get out of bed. We will probably have digested some food from things we'd eaten the night before. The body, while not always working perfectly, is a series of miracles each and every day. Join with me as we read the bracha on the top of page 63. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ahadam b'chokhmah uvaravo nekavim chalulim galui v'yadua lifnei chisod kevodecha, she'im yapatech echad mehem o yisatem echad mehem efshar lehitkayem v'la'amod lefanecha. Baruch atah Adonai rofecha basar umafli la'asot. We'll sing Elohai Neshama, page 63. Elohai Neshama, shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai Neshama, shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai Neshama, shenatata bi tehorahi. If you're able to rise, the morning brachot, the Birkot HaShachar, page 65. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher natan lasech vivina lahavchin ben yom uven laila.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani b'tzalmo.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani ben chorim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokev kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasali kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Ozeh Yisrael bigvurah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Oteh Yisrael b'tifarah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten li ayef koach. We invite you to be seated as we continue. Page 65. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam. Uhutneinu hayam v'choyam l'cheinu l'chesed rachamim, v'necha v'neit kol dorenu temelenu chasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai, gomel chasadim tovim li'amo Yisrael. Yirat tovim l'fanechem. Ribon kol olamim atzadakenu makum lecha. Ma'yishenu ma'kochenu ma'gvuratenu. Aval ha'nachnu amcha v'nei britecha v'nei Avraham. Ashreinu ma tov chalkeinu u'mana'im goraleinu u'mayafa Yerushateinu. Ashreinu shenachtem mashkeminu marivim erev avoker v'omrim pamayim b'chol yom Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Page 67. Atahu shelo nivra ha'olam. Kadesh et shimcha makdishei shemecha v'kadesh et shimcha b'olamecha v'shuatcha tarim v'tagbi ha'karnenu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh et shimcha barabim. We'll continue now on page 72, continuing with Psalm 92, the Psalm for Shabbat. Mizmor, Mizmor, Shir, Shir Leyom HaShabbat. 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 Tavlotat l'Adonai zamer l'shimcha elyon. Akiva v'chashtecha v'nadcha b'leilon. Ki simachtanu nevalecha. Yine v'cha. Tzadik hatamar yifrach ger bavanon yizke. Shutulim b'vet Adonai. Od yenevun b'sevat. Eshenim v'rananim yihiyu. Lehagid ki ashar Adonai. Tzuri ve'lohav latavo. Turn with me to page 81 as we continue the service now with Psalm 30, the psalm of the awareness at times in our lives of aloneness, of God's absence, and of calling out even from those dark places for the possibility of connection. Page 81. Mizmor shir Chanukat habayit leDavid amichadi latani v'lo simachto evaili zamru l'Adonai chasidav v'hosu l'zekekalo elecha Adonai ekra, v'el Adonai etchanam. Elecha, Adonai ekra, v'el Adonai etchanam. Shema Adonai v'chaneni, Adonai ozer li. Ha'hafachta mispiti lemacholi, pitachta saki v'tazreni simcha, למען ישמרך חבו ולא ידום, אדוני אלוהי, לעולם עודך. Do we have anyone in this room who is saying Kaddish at this moment? All right, well, we are going to continue the service now on page 83. If you're able to rise, we say God creates the world with words. We remind ourselves that our own words can create and sometimes destroy worlds. Page 83. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch ha'aseh v'reshit, Baruch omer v'aseh, Baruch ozer u'mekayem, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habrihot, Baruch mishalem sachar tov l'rehav, Baruch ha'ilad v'kayam la'netzach, Baruch podehu matzil, Baruch she'enom. Yahachid chelamim melech mishubach umforade ad shemo hagadol, Baruch atah Adonai melech mehulal vatishbacho. Please be seated. Join with me on page 92. The world's kind of a mess right now. It's kind of dicey out there. There's wars, divisions. There are lingering variants of pandemics. And yet, here we are, it's Shabbat. And even in the dark times, we try to sing Ki le'olam chasto. We try to say, yeah, but there's still that connection with that which is eternal, that which takes the temporary and connects it to something beyond ourselves. And so this whole psalm is just a review, essentially, of all of Jewish history, from the dark times to the times of jubilation. And through it all, we sing Ki le'olam chasto. So join with me for the first 8 and the last 4 verses, page 92. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasto. Hodu le'Elohei ha'Elohim, ki le'olam chasto. Hodu l'Adonai ha'adonim, ki le'olam chasto. Li'oseh nifla'ot gedola levado, ki le'olam chasto. Li'oseh hashamayim b'tvuna, ki le'olam chasto. Le'roka ha'aretz al hamayim, ki le'olam chasto. Li'oseh orim gedolim, ki le'olam chasto. Et hashemesh lememshelet b'hayom, ki le'olam chasto. Shabishvilenu zachar lanu, ki le'olam chasto. Vayifrekenu mitzareinu, כי לעולם חסדו. נותן הלחם לכל בשר, כי לעולם לעולם חסדו. יפרקנו מצרים, כי לעולם חסדו. כי לעולם חסדו. Page 96. Ashrei Yoshveh Veitecha Od Hallelujah Od Hallelujah Selah. We take some time for our own quiet reflections as we continue. Page 96, Hilal David Aromim Chalalech. Tehillah, Adonai, Yedaber pi, Vivarek kol basar, Shem kodsho le'olam vahed, Va'anachnu nevarech, Page 100, the last line of Psalm 150. Kol ha-neshama tehallel, hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama tehallel, hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Elohim Elohei Yisrael Senefilot Levado Ubaruch Shem Kavod Leolam V'Yamalech Vado Et Kol Haaretz Amen V'Amen. If you're able to rise, please do so. Page 101. Vayevarech David Adonai Lenei Kol HaKahal. Atahu Adonai Levadecha Tasit Et HaShamayim Shemei HaShamayim. Atahu Adonai HaElohim Asher Bacharta Ba'Avram V'Hotzeto Me'ur Kasdim V'Hesamta Shmo Avraham U'Matzat Et Levavo Ne'aman Lefanecha V'Charodim Zakrani Ki Yadata Ki Yadet Halemu V'Hayam Bakata Lifnehem V'Yavru V'Tochayam V'Yavasha V'et rofem hitzlachta b'msalot kmo even b'mayim azim v'yasha Adonai b'yomahu v'hayar Yisrael het hayad hagedala asher asa Adonai b'mitzrayim v'yir'u ha'am et Adonai v'yamir b'Adonai u'v'Moshe avdo Az Yashir Moshe u'Bnei Yisrael et Ashira hazot l'Adonai vayomru lemor Ashir al Adonai ki gahoga sus v'rochevo rama v'hayam Ozi v'zimrat yah v'yili lishua Zeheli v'yanvehu Elohei Havivi Havromehu Adonai Yishmelcha
נאמר כי עוד פרעה וחיל עורב.
Adonai Yimloch le'olam vahed. Adonai Yimloch le'olam vahed. Adonai hamlucha Moshe v'goyim v'alu Moshim b'har Tzion lishbot et har Esav v'yital Adonai hamlucha v'haya Adonai lemelcha kol ha'aretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. Please be seated. I want to give a little quick pre-Shachrit little vort on the parasha from a Hasidic master, Rabbi Shmelki of Nikolsburg, a 19th century Hasidic master. And I want to just frame this by saying that I was listening to a lecture on Tuesday night from the woman who is the rabbi, doctor, translator of the Sfat Emet material that I've been teaching for the last couple of months. And she was talking about the fact that she's been doing research on the Piazenza Rebbe, who was the rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto, and she was talking about this concept I'd never heard about called theological vertigo, meaning being in a place where the entire foundation of your world outside and around you is essentially bringing you to a sense of complete vertigo, of such instability and such upside downness that what comes out of that is all the more remarkable for it being about a relationship to God. And as I think many of you know, the Piazenza knew that eventually, that basically, that as even as he was writing his last commentaries in the ghetto, that he would not survive the ordeal. And so he arranged for his commentaries to be smuggled out and were buried. So eventually they were found, and there are interesting there are some manuscript inundations that sort of have some asterisks about him rewriting a little bit of his commentary as he was coming to the end of his life, and the Nazis were getting closer. It's a very moving concept about how do you write about God when you are in the middle of just evil and colossal destruction. So in the context of a Rebbe being able to write about the reality of God's existence in the midst of the most horror of evil that humans have ever experienced, let me share a commentary from another Hasidic master who lived in Eastern Europe, where Cossacks were causing other kinds of pain and destruction to the Jewish people. So it's a comment on this week's parasha and the famous phrase, "V'ahavta l'riecha kamocha," to love your neighbor as yourself, which is at the heart of this parasha of Kedoshim. So how do you do that? How do you do that when you're confronted, one of the Rebbe's students says, with an evil person? And the Rebbe says, it means loving your neighbor like something which you yourself are. And he says, for all souls are one. Each is a spark from the original soul, and this soul is inherent in all souls, just as your soul is in all parts of your body. He said, it might happen that your hand made mistakes and accidentally strikes you. Would you then take a stick and hit your hand because it lacked understanding and increase your pain? It's the same if your neighbor, who is of one soul with you, wrongs you for lack of understanding. If you punish your neighbor, you are only hurting yourself. So that's a commentary written by someone who was facing exile and expulsion and death from the Cossacks, and was writing, if you see your neighbor, you have to see the soul of God in your neighbor. So that's obviously a very messianic vision of the world. Not the world as we know it, but the world that we aspire to bring, in which we can see the humanity in the person, even the person who wants to do us harm. So if they could have that consciousness, perhaps we could in our circumstances, have a little bit more of it. We'll conclude the Pesukei de Zimra, page 104, Nishmat Kol Chai. Nishmat Kol Chai, Tivarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu, Korach Basam. Ilufinu male shira kayam ulashonenu rina kamon galui. Ein anachnu maspikim lahodot lecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu. Mi Mitzrayim galtanu Adonai Eloheinu mi beit avatim v'titanu. Kein avadim shabakta banu. Nehalecha nshapechacha nevarecha nevarech et shem kadshecha ka'amor leDavid barchi nafshi et Adonai v'chol kravai et shem kodsho ha'hel b'tatzumahot uzecha hagadol b'chvod shemecha hagibor lanetzach v'hanora b'nohorotecha ha'melech ha'yoshev al kisei ram v'nisan. Cantor continues, Shochin Ad, the middle of page 105.
Shochin Ad marom v'kadosh shemo.
Shochin Ad marom v'kadosh shemo.
בפי ישרים תתהלל, ובדברי צדיקים תתברך, ובלשון חסידים תתרומם, ובקרב קדושים תתקדש. ובמקלות רביבות עמך בית ישראל. בנפש שמותיהם בכל דור ודור, שכן חובת כל היצורים לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, להודות, להלל, לשבח, לבאר, לרמם, להדר, לברך, לקלס, על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות, דוד בן ישי, עבדך משיחך.
We invite you to rise, page 106.
ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. שיר עוז ממשלה נצח. ברכות ודעות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני אל המלך גדול בתשבחות אל ההודעות אדוני נפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אלוהי העולמים יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ביעלמה דברה קירותי ומלך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל בגלה וזמקריב ואמרו אמן יש שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולמי המיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לאל מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן ביעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Invite you to be seated.
אין כי ירכך בעולם הזה ואין זאתך מלכנו לחיי העולם הבא אפס בלתך גדול לימות המשיח ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים.
Join with us, page 108. What's he doing sitting on his seat? What's the story here? I don't understand. It's our official El Adon singer.
It's El Rob, he said.
Page 108.
אל אדון על כל המעשים ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה גדלו וטובו מלא עולם דעת ותבונה סובב ממותו המתגאה על חיות הקודש נדר בכבוד על המרחבה זכות ומישור לפני כיסו חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ובהשכל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל מלאים זיו ומפיקים הנוגה זיבם בכל העולם שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם עושים בהם הרצון קונם פייר וכבוד נותנים לשמו צולה ורינה זכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ויזרח אור רב התקין צורת הלבנה שבח נותנים לו קוצבה מרום תפארת וגדולה סרפים ויופנים וחיות הקודש. Page 109 להרשות מכל המעשים ביום השביעי. עוד נקרא ליום השבת זה שבח לשם. יום השביעי משמע. טוב להודות אדוני לפיך שבח יקר מלאך יוצר כל ביום שבת קודש. תדבק משה על שבח מעשה ידיך ואמריור שעשית רפארו כסלע. Page 110 תתברך צורנו מלכנו וגואלנו בורא קדושים כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים במה ורצון קונם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה, ובטהרה בשירה, ובזמרה, ומברכים שבחים פערים מריצים הקדישים, וממליכים את שם האל המלך, הגדול הגיבור והנורא גדול וכולם מקבלים עליהם למלכות שמיים זה מזה ונותנים רשות זה לזה להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח בשפה ורב נימה קדושה כולם כחדונים ואומרים ביראה קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו ואפנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מטסים השרפים למטה משבחים ויאמרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו ליאל ברוך נמות איתנו בעל מלחמות זורע צדקות מצמיח ישועות ברשת אור חדש על ציון תאיר 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 ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות.
Page 111.
אבל אהבתנו אדוני אלוהינו חמלה גדולה ויתרה חמלת עלינו אבינו מלכנו בעבור אבותינו שבטחו בך אבינו מלכנו, אבינו אברהם, והיירננו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחל לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. ואבינו לשלום בארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו, כי אל הפועל ישועת אתה, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע סלע באמת, להודות לך וליחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. והיה אם שמעו תשמעו מצוותיי אשר נהי מצוותיכם היום אצלכם וסבתא ושמרו לכם ושמתם את דברי אל לבבכם לאנשיכם כמותם להיות על ידיכם למען ירבו ממכם לבניכם על האדמה אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיכם לתת להם, כי מהשמיים על הארץ. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, ויעשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וריתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם, ולא תעתורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריכם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת אמת ויציב נכון וקיים וישר נאמנו וחביב לעולם ועד לדור ודור וקיים ושמו קיים וכיסון נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת ודבריו חיים וקיימים נעמדים נחמדים לעד עולמי עלמים על אבותינו ועל אבותינו ותורותינו דבר טוב וקיים לעולם ועד אמת שכנונה כל אמת שאתה הולך במותינו מלכנו מלך אבותינו גואלנו גואל אבותינו יוצרנו ישועתנו פודל מצילנו מעולם שמך אין אלוהים זולתך
Page 114.
עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם מגן מושיע לבניכם אחריכם בכל דור ודור ברור למוש אשרי איש שישמע מצוותיך אין על מלך גואל מושיע ממצרים גאלתנו אלוהינו מבית עבדים ביתי ברכות ודורות למלך על חי וקיים רם ונישא גדול ונורא משפיק תהילות אלוהים ברכו מבורך משה בני ישראל לקנו שירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים שמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Invite you to rise.
צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופדי קדומך יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני
We join together with Chazan, page 115b.
אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה אלוהי רבקה אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון גומל מלך חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה אתה גיבור עולם אדוני מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע מוריד הטל מקלקל חיים בחסד מקיים מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך מימין ומקיים ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמנת לך חיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה המתים.
אמן. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מערום, ככתוב ביד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר.
נקדש את שמך בעולם בשם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב לנביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, אז בקול רעש גדול אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנסים לעומת השרפים, מתנסים לעומת השרפים, מתנסים לעומת השרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו.
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
ברוך אדוני ממקומו, ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך? תמלוך בציון בקרוב בימינו, לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד תשכון. תתקדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה, תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. ידיד משיח צדקך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, הללויה.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך. ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לא ימוש לעולם ועד. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך. כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה, וקדוש וקדוש אתה. כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה, וקדוש וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We continue privately through page 120. נשמח לשנות הכל. ושני לוחות עברים. ושם ובני תפילת השבת לעשות את השבת לתורת ברית העולם. Those of you who are still davening, please continue. Those of you who have concluded should turn ahead with us to page 138 as we conclude Shacharit with Kaddish Shalem.
יתקדש ויקדש השם רבה.
Amen.
ויעלמה דברי קירותי והמלך מלכותי בחייכון ומכון וכעת כל בית ישראל בגלה וזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. ישמר רבה מבורך יודע מודע מעמיה יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ותהלל לשם מידי קודשה פריחו לאלה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בלמה ואמרו אמן תתקבע וצותקון ובאותכון דכל ישראל קודם ובהון דבישמעיה ואמרו אמן יהי שלמה רבה משמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום ממרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
We want to say Shabbat Shalom and good morning. Welcome to all. For those who came out in the rain, our heroes, and for those who are watching on the Zoom, our heroes as well. It's been a lot of rain. It's a lot of rain. So we are very, very excited because we have our own Hank Albert is going to be speaking to us a little bit later this morning about a new memoir that he's written about growing up with an identical twin, which will be very wonderful to listen to. And Hank is going to stay around for lunch, and if people want to continue the conversation at lunch, we'll do that. So I'm not going to be giving a Devar Torah this morning. Yay! Is that what I hear? No. You love my Divrei Torah, I know that. Right, Marcel? So what I did want to do, because two things. Number one, Parashat Kedoshim, about holiness and what it means to live a life of holiness and the power and importance of life. And obviously the very controversial leak of a preliminary opinion in the Supreme Court about abortion rights in this country. I wanted to just make sure everyone in this room is educated about what the Jewish tradition says on the question of abortion. Not to give it a point of view one way or the other, but you should know what our tradition says. So that's my introduction to Kedoshim, and it will, I promise, not be too long. So for Jewish tradition, the question of abortion is a bit more nuanced than what we see as the debate as it is usually presented in this country. Now, most of Jewish religious leaders in this country, and that ranges from Orthodox to Reform, actually support there being laws that allow women to have abortions. But the reason for that is not according to Jewish tradition, because women should have autonomy over their own body. And our rabbinic positions that speak about abortions do not believe that life begins at conception. So both, we do not, as Jews, historically understand that life begins at conception, and we do not say the woman has a right to choose because a woman has control over her body. Those are things that are not generally part of Jewish traditional understandings. Generally, there is a belief that abortion should be as rare as possible, if at all possible, but where there is agreement, again, spanning the denominations, that to the extent that a woman's life would be at jeopardy were she to give birth, the tradition from Orthodox to Reform is that an abortion is not only encouraged, but is demanded to preserve the life of a mother. So just a little background on that. So from the rabbinic debate goes back to the question that's found in the book of Exodus in chapter 21, where we read that if a man accidentally or harms a woman who is pregnant and the woman miscarries as a result of being struck, the punishment for doing so is that there is a monetary penalty that must be paid. In contrast to the fact where the Torah will say that if one takes the life of another, that that person's life, theoretically, at least it says in the Torah, whether or not the rabbis interpreted it to mean capital punishment is a whole other question. But on the basis of the fact that the punishment was a monetary punishment for causing a miscarriage, the rabbis were understanding that that fetus was not considered fully a life when a woman was pregnant. And so, therefore, even on the very orthodox parts of the world, a fetus does not have the status of a full life, which is in contrast to what most Christian positions that support, that do not want abortions to take place. So that, from the difference, of course, is that from a more orthodox perspective, life is sacred. We do not have the ability to decide when and if life should or should not take place. Therefore, the idea of abortion on demand is not something that is advocated, certainly in the more traditional parts of the Jewish community. But there need to be cases in which abortion would be possible depending on circumstances, not only the health of a mother, but rape, incest, et cetera, et cetera. Even the Haredi advocacy group in this country, Agudath Israel, which are the ultra-Orthodox lobbying group in this country, wrote in 2019, Agudath Israel has long promoted the regulation of abortion through laws that generally prohibit the unjustifiable killing of fetuses while protecting the right to abortion in exceptional circumstances. So that's Haredi. Here in the conservative movement, again, it's very clear from conservative legal opinions that a fetus does not have the same legal status as a human being until it is born. So that generally, the conservative movement, again, is not necessarily saying that conservative legal understanding is that abortion on demand is a right. But where I say the conservative rabbinic opinion is different than the more orthodox opinion is that the notion of a woman's health is given much wider leeway within conservative thought, meaning that to the extent that the mental health of a woman would be imperiled by giving birth, whether it's because a woman is in an abusive relationship or has several children already and feels overwhelmed. So in the conservative movement, a rabbinic position would be that the mental health and well-being of the mother takes precedence as well. And so abortion would be permissible with a wider range of what would constitute the health and well-being of the mother, which would always take priority. And so that's the major difference of the conservative position on this. And there have been more progressive conservative rabbis who have written a little bit more about this question of bodily autonomy. And Rabbi Danya Rutenberg, I want to give a quote here, says, she writes, in Judaism, she's a conservative rabbi, a fetus is not regarded as an independent being. It is part of the body of the person carrying it. So that in general, if you're trying to say to someone who asks you, what is the Jewish position on abortion? Generally, it is not abortion on demand, in the sense that a woman should be able to make any choice that she wants. That's much more of an American point of view about, this is my body, I can do what I want with it. A Jewish position is much more, traditionally we don't put tattoos on our bodies. There are certain things that we don't do from a religious perspective because we say that our body is a gift. It's not ours to choose exactly all things related to it, so that the tradition would be more that we can't just because we accidentally got pregnant, that's the reason in and of itself, but we certainly would not want to live in a country from the Jewish perspective that would not permit abortions under any circumstances, and that the life of the mother always will take priority. And then again, the differences tend to be around what constitutes the health and well-being of the mother as to whether or not a decision to abort would be warranted from a Jewish legal perspective. So that's for you to just have in your pocket. Whether or not you agree with that position, it's not whether or not you think that would advocate how you would think about it as an American and what you would be marching or not marching for here. That's for you each to make, but to the extent that you want a little bit of an understanding about the tradition, that was my goal in presenting this to you this morning. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
And we will now prepare for the Torah service and invite you to turn back to your Siddur, page 139.
Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai, ve'en kemaasecha, malechutecha, malechut kol olamim, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. הרחמים, היטיבה ברצונך את ציון. תבנה חומות ירושלים, תבנה חומות ירושלים. כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך רם ונישא, אדון עולמים.
We invite you to rise because the ark is open.
ויהי בנשוא אהרון, ויאמר משה, קומה אדוני, ויפוצו אויביך, וינוסו משנאיך מפניך,
Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. Udevar Adonai miYerushalayim. Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah. Le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Join us, page 140, Be'anarachetz.
Be'anarachetz v'lishme kadisha kadisha yakira ana'emar tushbechad Be'anarachetz Be'anarachetz v'lishme kadisha kadisha yakira ana'emar tushbechad Yeheira ava odamach detiftach libi beoraita ותשלים משאלין דליבי וליבה דכל עמך ישראל לטוב ולחיים ולשלום. Amen.
We'll continue responsively, page 141.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Galilul Adonai iti Unrama Shemo Yachelav Lecha Adonai
Hagedula Hagevura V'hatiferet
Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
All right. He doesn't only do El Adam, he also does Kimitzion. All right, you may be seated. Kedoshim. Holy, holy, holy. We are at the heart of the Torah. We're beginning on page 696. At the opening, verse 15. Verse 15, page 696. All right, Hank and Emma are coming up for the first Aliyah. V'yazor v'yagem yeshilach osim bo v'nomar, Amen. Hakol havu godenu Kol havu godel elhenu kavod la Torah. Wait a minute, 1 second. Before you do that, yeah. Do I need your Hebrew names? Tzvi
Ben Yaakov.
Tzvi ben Yaakov. Chana Ruth. Aliyah Rishona. Baruch Shenatan Torah Yamo Yisrael B'Kedushato. V'aten v'gigim Adonai Elohechem. Hayim kolchem hayom.
Baruchu et Adonai Hamvarach. Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. לא תעשו עוול במשפט, לא תיספני דל, ולא תדר פני גדול, בצדק תשפוט עמיתך, לא תלך רכיל בעמך, לא תעמוד על דם רעך, אני אדוני. לא תשנא את אחיך בלבבך, תוכיח את עמיתך, ולא תישא עליו חטא. לא תקום ולא תיטור את בני עמך, ואהבת לרעך כמוך, אני אדוני.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Second Aliyah continues verse 19, page 697. Yamod Mordechai ben Harav Nachum Halevi V'tzipora. Did I get that right? Sheni. You can give that to who's collecting the cards.
Baruchu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'nasan lanu et Torah. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
אמן. את חוקותיי תשמורו, בהמתך לא תרביע כלאיים, שדך לא תזרע כלאיים, ובהגד כלאיים שתנס לא יעלה עליך. איש כי ישכב את האישה שכבת זרע, והיא שפחה נחרחפת לאיש, וחופתה לא תפדת, או חופשה לא ניתן לה. בביקורת תהיה לא יומתו, כי לא חופשה. והביא את אשמו לאדוני אל פתח אוהל מועד, אל אשם, וכיפר עליו הכהן באל האשם לפני אדוני על חטאתו אשר חטא, ונסלח לו מחטאתו אשר חטא.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher nasan lanu Torah emes v'chayei olam nota b'sochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Ya'amod. Yehuda Yaakov ben Menashe. Besor Miral Shlishi. We continue page 30. Verse 23, page 698.
Baruch
Hu et Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. והתאבואו אל הארץ, ונטעתם כל עץ מאכל, וערלתם אורלתו את פריו. 3 שנים יהיה לכם, ערלים לא יאכל, ובשנה הרביעית יהיה כל פריו, קודש הילולים לאדוני, ובשנה החמישית תאכלו את פריו, להוסיף לכם תבואתו. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, לא תאכלו על הדם, לא תנחשו ולא תאוננו, לא תקיפו פאת ראשכם, ולא תשחית את פאת זקנך, וסרט לנפש לא תיתנו בבשרכם, וכתובת קעקע לא תיתנו בכם. אני אדוני. אל תחלל את בתך להזנותה, ולא תזנה הארץ ומלאה הארץ זימה. את שבתותי תשמרו ומקדשי תיראו. אני אדוני. אל תפנו את אל האובות ואל הידונים, אל תבקשו לטומאה בהם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. מפני שיבה תקום, והדרת פני זקן, ויראת מאלוהיך. אני אדוני.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet, V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. The fourth Aliyah continues now, verse 33. Yamod, Ruben Yosef Ben. Yaakov Begrunde, Rivi'i, page 700, verse 33.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
אמן. וכי יגור איתך גר בארצכם, לא תונו אותו, כאזרח מכם יהיה לכם הגר איתכם, ואהבת לו כמוך, כי גרים הייתם בארץ מצרים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. לא תעשו עוול במשפט, במידה, במשקל ובמשורה. מאזני צדק, אבני צדק, איפת צדק, והין צדק יהיה לכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, ושמרתם את כל חוקותיי ואת כל משפטיי, ועשיתם אותם. אני אדוני.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Ya'amod. Avram Benjamin Ben. Melech Be'elka Chamishi. We continue the opening of chapter 20, page 700 of your Chumash.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור ואל בני ישראל תאמר איש איש מבני ישראל ומן הגר הגר בישראל אשר ייתן מזרעו למולך מות יומת עם הארץ ירגמוהו באבן ואני אתן את פניי באיש ההוא והכרתי אותו מקרב עמו כי מזרעו נתן למולך למען טמא את מקדשי ולחלל את שם קודשי ואם הלם ילימו עם הארץ את עיניהם מן האיש ההוא בתיתו מזרעו למולך לבלתי המית אותו ושמתי אני את פניי באיש ההוא ובמשפחתו והכרחתי אותו ואת כל הזונים אחריו לזנות אחרי המולך מקרב עמם והנפש אשר תפנה אל האובות ואל הידעונים לזנות אחריכם ונתתי את פניי בנפש ההיא והכרתי אותו מקרב עמו והתקדשתם והייתם קדושים כי אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet b'chayei olam atah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. So we now understand, as you will be hearing from this reading, that there is a distinct connection between crossing sexual boundaries and a kind of loosening of what a fabric that holds a society together. So this next aliyah will be on forbidden sexual relationships. Ya'amdu Rina Freda Bat Harav Pinchas Yosef Uvatya Ve'et Eliyahu Ephraim Chanoch Halevi Rachel Chinda, Aliyah Shishit. The sixth Aliyah now continues, verse 8, page 701.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. ושמרתם את חוקותיי ועשיתם אותם. אני אדוני מקדישכם כי איש אשר יקלל את אביו ואת אמו מות יומת אביו ואמו קילל דמיו בו ואיש אשר ינף את אשת איש אשר ינף את אשת רעהו מות יומת הנואף והנואפת ואיש אשר ישכב את אשת אביו ערוות אביו גילה מות יומתו שניהם דמיהם בם, ואיש אשר ישכב את כלתו מות יומתו שניהם, תבל עשו דמיהם בם, ואיש אשר ישכב את זכר משכבי אישה, תועבה עשו שניהם, מות יומתו דמיהם בם, ואיש אשר ייקח את אישה ואת אמה זימה היא, באש ישרפו אותו ותן, ולא תהיה זימה בתוככם, ואיש אשר ייתן שכבתו בבהמה מות יומת, ואת בהמה תהרוגו, ואישה אשר תקרב אל כל בהמה לריבה אותה, והרגת את האישה ואת בהמה מות יומתו דמיהם בם, ואיש אשר ייקח את אחותי בת אביו בת אמו, וראה את ערוותה, והיא תראה את ערוותו, חסד הוא, ונכרתו לעיני בני עמם, ערוות אחותי גילה עוונו יישא, ואיש אשר ישכב את אישה דמה, וגילה את ערוותה, את מקורה הרע, ואיש גילתה את מקור דמך, ונכרתו שניהם מקרב עמם, ורבות אחות אמך ואחות אביך לא תגלה, כי את שאירו העירה עוונם יישאו, ואיש אשר ישכב את דודתו, ערוות דודו גילה, חטאם יישאו, ערירים ימותו, ואיש אשר יקם את אשת אחיו נידה היא, ערוות אחיו גילה, ערירים יהיו, ושמרתם את כל חוקותי ואת כל משפטי ועשיתם אותם, ולא תקים אתכם הארץ אשר אני מביא אתכם שמה לשבת בה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן הטוב.
Amen. We continue with the seventh Aliyah, beginning at the bottom of page 703 with verse 23. Ya'amdu. Wait, the first part, Sarah? Leah Sarabat. David v'Fredel v'et. Aryeh ben Nachum. L'Aliyah Shvi'it.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
אמן. ולא תלכו בחוקות הגוי אשר אני משלח מפניהם, כי את כל אלה עשו ועקוץ בם, ואומר לכם, אתם תירשו את אדמתם, ואני אתננה לכם לרשת אותה ארץ זבת חלב ודבש. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הבדלתי אתכם מן העמים, והבדלתם בין הבהמה הטהורה לטמאה ובין העוף הטמא לטהור, ולא תשקצו את נפשותיכם בבהמה ובעוף ובכל אשר תרמוס האדמה אשר הבדלתי לכם לטמא, והייתם לי קדושים, כי קדוש אני אדוני, ואבדיל אתכם מן העמים להיות לי, ואיש או אישה, כי יהיה בהם אוב או ידוני מות יומתו בהם, ירגמו אותם דהם פעם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam notah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We're going to pause briefly and invite you to fill this room with the images in your minds of people in need of healing. As we come to the Mishaberach L'Cholim, we'll pause and invite you to quietly name the people you know who are in need of healing at this time. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah, Hu Yivarech v'Yirapeh et Cholim et HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachim Yimaleyhem L'Hachizikam Avrapotam V'Yishlach Lehem Mehera Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'toch Sha'ar Cholei Yisrael Shabbati Milizok Hashta B'Agalav Izman Kariv V'Nomar Amen. We'll invite you to rise if you are able for the Chatzi Kaddish.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה,
Amen.
ויעלמה דברי קירותי והמלך מלכותי,
וחייכון ויומכון ובחייך בית ישראל בעגלה בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ויום יתברך.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשם
ברכו
לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה
תושבחתה ונחמתה דהמירן מעלמה.
ויאמרו
Amen. We want to invite you to be seated. Ivy is going to come for the Maftir Aliyah, found on page 704, verse 25. Ta'amod. Sivya bat. Eliakum b'chanaleya Maftir.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, V'natan Lanu et Torato, Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. והבדלתם בין הבהמה הטהורה לטמאה ובין העוף הטמא לטהור, ולא תשקצו את נפשותיכם בבהמה ובעוף ובכל אשר תרמוס האדמה אשר הבדלתי לכם לטמא, והייתם לי קדושים כי קדוש אני אדוני. ואבדיל אתכם מן העמים להיות לי, ואיש או אישה, כי יהיה בהם אוב, או ידעוני מות יומתו, באבן ירגמו אותם דמיהם בם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We'll invite you to rise as the Sefer Torah will be lifted and dressed. Ya'amdu ha'magbiya v'hagolelet. V'zot ha'Torah, v'zot ha'Torah, asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael, al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe. Tetzei Torah, uvar Hashem Yerushalayim, ki mitzion. Tetzei Torah, uvar Hashem Yerushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah li'amo, Torah li'amo Yisrael. Baruch shenatan Torah li'amo Yisrael b'kedushato ki mitzion. Tetzei Torah, uvar Hashem Yerushalayim, ki mitzion. Tetzei Torah, uvar Hashem Yerushalayim. We're going to invite you to be seated. The Haftarah for this parasha of Kedoshim is from Amos, the prophet Amos. And it's a prophecy that says that just because you are God's people, don't believe that you will be free from the punishment that God will mete out to all the other nations of the world that are sinful. And God says here in this Haftarah that there will be a small remnant of the Israelite people who will be chosen because they maintain the covenant. And that ultimately it is a prophecy which reminds us that our relationship with God is not based on history, but it's based on how we act, and ultimately the way in which we fulfill our mandate of this parasha of being a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. You'll find the Haftarah that Ivy will be chanting, beginning on page 706 of your Chumash.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai aboher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nviei ha'emet v'hatzedek. Halokivnei kushim Atem li b'nei Yisrael ne'um Adonai. Halo et Yisrael ha'elet meretz Mitzrayim uflishtim mikaftor va'aram mikir. Hine ani Adonai Elohim v'malacha chachata'a v'hishmatiti oto me'al pinei ha'adama efes ki lo hashmid et Beit Yaakov ne'um Adonai. Ki hine anochi mitzaveh v'hani oti b'chol hagoyim et Beit Yisrael ka'asher yinua bakvara v'lo yipol tzaror haaretz. B'erev yamutu kol chata'ei ami ha'omrim lo tagish v'takdim ba'adenu yihara'a b'yom hahu akim et sukat David hanofelet v'gadarti et pirtehem v'harsotav akim uvnitiha kimei olam lema'an yirshu et she'arit Edom v'chol hagoyim asher nigrashimi alehem ne'um Adonai osezot. Hine yamim ba'im ne'um Adonai v'nagash haresh ba'kotzer v'dorech hanavim v'moshech hazara v'hitifu hacharim asis v'ha'aglaot titmagagna v'shavati et shavut ami Yisrael uvanu arim nishamot v'yashavu v'natnu kiramim v'shatu et yenam v'yasu ganot v'achlu et pirihem v'nat etim al adamatam v'lo yinatshu od me'al adamatam asher natati lahem amar Adonai Elohecha. Okay, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Tzor Kol Ha'olamim Sadik B'chol Hadavrot Ha'el HaNeheman HaOmer Yosef Hamdaber Umkayem Shekol Devarav Emet V'Tzedek Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'ne'emanim devarecha v'davar echad mivarecha achor lo yashuv rekam ki melech ne'eman v'rachaman ata baruch ata Adonai ha'el ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav rachem al tzion ki beit chayenu ve'al aluvat nefesh toshiach b'mheira v'yameinu baruch ata Adonai mesameach Zion b'vanecha samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu v'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha uv'malchut Beit David mishichecha b'mheira yavo ויגל ליבנו, על כיסו לא ישב זור, ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו. כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ביום השבת הזה שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת.
Amen. We say Yishar Kochech to Ivy on chanting Haftarah for us this morning. Yishar Kochech.
Thank you. Can I say one thing?
And she will say one thing.
Maybe one thing. Okay, so I want to give kavod to my teacher, Chazan Tillman, and Rabbi Aaron Landis of blessed memory, because I took the adult bat mitzvah course here, and it just so happens in May 1987, I had an adult bat mitzvah here.
Thank you for Mazel Tov, and thank you for remembering your teachers this morning. We want to invite first Ira and then Randy and Don to lead us in the prayer, first for our country, and then for the prayer for the state of Israel. If you're able to rise, we continue now on page 148 with the prayer for our country.
Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah, that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony, to banish hatred and bigotry, and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country. May this land, under your providence, be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Yishkoach. And we continue now on with the prayer for the state of Israel as we ask the Sables to lead us.
Avinu
Shabbat Shamayim, Sur Yisrael v'Goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Geulatenu, Hagen Aleha Bi'abrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha V'yamit Al Rashecha, Sareya V'yotzecha,
V'takneim Be'etzah Tova Milfanecha, Hazek et Yidei Meginei Eretz Kadshenu, V'hanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, V'ateret Nitzachon Ta'adrem, V'natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'simchat Olam Liyoshvecha, V'nomar.
Amen. We invite you to remain standing as we prepare to return the Sefer Torah and turn to page 153. Yasher Koch to you all.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשגב שמו לבדו.
Hodo al Eretz b'shamayim, vayarem keren li'amo. Tila lechol chasidav, libnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Es chayim hi, lama chazikim ba, v'tomecheha meushar derachecha, darchei noam, v'chol netivoteha,
Shirenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Kadesh Kadesh Yameinu Kadesh Yameinu Kedesh.
Please be seated. So it's my honor to introduce Hank Albert, who's going to speak to us this morning. Hank has recently published a book. It's a memoir about growing up with an identical twin. We know that our Jewish tradition has lots of stories of twins, and so wanted to give Hank an opportunity just to help us all understand this very interesting phenomenon of having a sibling who is identical to you. Let me tell you a little bit about Hank, who, as many of you, or most of you know, is married to Emma Raymond, who is here in the room with him this morning for Shabbat. They are the parents of Corey and Perry, who were both B'nai Mitzvah here at Beth Shalom congregation. Hank spent his professional career in education for over close to 40 years, and over 20 of them as a teacher in the Abington School District. He has long ties to the community through his work with Kehila Soccer. He's been very involved in Camp Galil and in other Jewish causes. And we are very happy, Hank, that you are going to be here to share a little bit about your brother and about your memoir. And I'm going to turn the mic over to you. And it looks like you've brought some audio-visual materials, or as in...
Noticed this on the way in, but my daughter spent a lot of time putting the poster of my brother and I together, so I wanted to make sure you got a chance to see it. I was thinking maybe if you want me to put it in front? Yeah. Okay. It'll state it. I think it will.
Great. Thank you, Rabbi GK, and everyone here at Beth Shalom, and all of you for coming, especially out in the rain today, for giving me the opportunity to tell you about my new memoir. It's entitled Half But Whole, Reflections of a Twin's Life.
By the way, Hank, I just want you to know, you have a lot of people watching you on the Zoom as well.
And I want to mention my friend Michelle, who I think she's watching from Texas today, so I want to shout out to her. Hi, if you're there. I don't know where I'm supposed to wave. As a first-time author, I'm proud to say that this book has been receiving positive reviews so far. So I'm excited to have the chance to share it with you. It's going to be available in bookstores starting Wednesday, May 11th. That's this week. And if you're interested, I can get you a copy of it even sooner than that. Let me know after we're finished. We'll see how well I do here today. The story is about growing up with my identical twin. His name was Chuck. Do we have any identical twins here in the audience today? I'm just curious. Not a one. Okay, good. Oh, you are. Wonderful. Maybe we'll have a chat afterwards. We'll compare notes. Great. Chuck and I were born 72 years ago. We were very unusual, of course, because identical twins only make up about 1/2 of 1% of births in the United States. I believe that being born as an identical twin is very special, but not just because it's so rare. There are a lot of other reasons why, and I'm going to try to explain some of that to you today. I would imagine that most people have the thought sometime in your life about what it's like for those people who were born with a twin, and how is their life special? How's it different? How does it set them apart? And what it's like to be, and just what it's like, day to day to be an identical twin. So you can't really figure that out on your own. If you're not a twin, you can't, there's nothing that you can really do to learn that. But I'm going to make an effort today to explain a little bit more about it that you might not already know. To begin with, I want to read an excerpt from the book. Here's a copy of it, by the way.
self-publishing this, which means that I hired a company to do all the hard work. And then, I did the hard work of writing it, but after that, it was all of their hard work. And they did the printing, the design, whatever, and I think it came out great. So I want to read a little bit of it right from the begin. It's right from the beginning of the book. And Larry and Lynn, I thank you for lending me your copy of this today. What it's like to be a twin. When people ask me what it's like to be a twin, I purposely give the wrong answer, nearly always. Well, I have no idea what it's like not to be a twin, so I really don't have anything to compare it with, is what I say. I choose to be disingenuous because the truth is much more intimate and complicated. However, here's the story of what happened to Chuck and I at Robbie's house. When we were about 15, my identical twin, Chuck, and I were with about 10 friends on a Friday night sitting in the backyard at our friend Robbie's house. Toward the end of the night, 3 unknown boys wandered by picking a fight. They clearly were under the influence of something that they should have avoided. Perhaps they focused on me because at 5 feet 5 inches, I was the shortest. I was nervous, but I refused to back down. Even as one of the thugs took a hefty, wild swing at me, I felt a surge of confidence, as though I had a secret weapon, and I expected something good to happen. At that moment, without a word or a signal, I watched as my amazing twin brother flung himself through the air and landed on my adversary with a protective shout. Together, we chased the 3 of them down the block, never to be seen at Robbie's house again. And that, in a nutshell, is my answer to what it's like to be an identical twin. Twinship doesn't make you a better person, but it does make you special, and it sets you apart from most others. I see it as in the same category as a person with a lovely singing voice, for instance, or someone who's an exceptional artist. Perhaps you're the head of your company, or you're the captain of your sports team. That would make you special. And if you can get 10 5-year-old children to sit in a circle quietly for 2 minutes, there must be something special about you, too. Not every set of identical twins is the same, even though they have exactly the same genes. Some twins may not seem very alike at all, but right from the start, Chuck and I were very identical. We were born only 1 minute apart. I was the oldest. And I'd fight you if you tell me that he was the oldest, because I never let that happen. We looked so much alike that our parents could hardly tell us apart. They needed to search for the tiny little dot of a birthmark on my left earlobe in order to be able to say that that was me and it wasn't him. Chuck and I shared a small bedroom in our Winfield row home while growing up. It was our little hideaway. It was our little sanctuary. It was usually fun and easy to have a constant playmate around all the time. It was great to have him have help doing my chores or studying for tests or having someone's shoulder to cry on. He was on my side nearly all the time, and I was on his side. He was my support system, and I was his. We shared each other's lives constantly and consistently, and took each other for granted, which we liked. While also, and this was equally as important, creating strategies for developing our ability to find our own separate personalities and identities. That didn't come till a bit later, but it was just as important as any of the developmental stages. As we grew older, we learned how to nurture our individualness. Soon we didn't allow our mother to dress us alike anymore. We developed separate hobbies and interests. We developed individual friendships with new people in our lives. Logic says that that would seem to have moved us farther apart. But in reality, these changes just became more things for us to share. They worked as bonding agents that brought us closer. It was a marvelous, safe, healthy, and very special way to grow up, and we were tremendously blessed to have each other with whom to share it. So the first part of the memoir is intended to help the reader understand how incredibly close my brother and I were to each other. As time went on, through school ages and professional development, our paths diverged, but they kept colliding back together again. As teenagers, we looked a bit less alike. When college time arrived, we separated and went to different schools, but we both wound up becoming educators, even though we learned to do it separately. When Chuck moved to California, I followed him a few years later, but it wasn't because I wanted to live near him. It was just the circumstances of the time. We earned separate jobs teaching school, but later wound up teaching in the very same school. That was a little bizarre for a lot of the people in the school with us, but nevertheless, we both did a good job anyway. Finally, we wound up living only 3 blocks away from each other in Philadelphia. It wasn't until well into adulthood that separate individual personalities completely emerged. But that did not dampen our devotion to each other. And as this story begins its march toward its climax, Chuck became very ill. When becoming a caregiver, my commitment to my twinship was stretched to its maximum. I cared for him during 6 months, during his horrendous hospital struggle, as he finally passed away due to brain cancer at age 33, in the prime of his life. This past Monday marked the 39th anniversary of his death. There's still a huge part of me that continues to mourn and to grieve. For 15 years after his death, I tried to regain myself and my emotional balance. The book articulates it much better than I can do right now, but that period of my life was the most crucial. I could have crumbled or had a breakdown, but I didn't. Eventually, I found the perfect teaching job for myself and retired with 37 years of teaching. I found a most lovely and wonderful wife to share, a wonderful, lovely wife to marry and to share the rest of my life with. I'm sure that many of you know, as Rabbi G.K. said, that she is well respected and well known here in the Beth Shalom community. We have 2 terrific college-age children, and thank you for identifying them before. But the reason that I did not crumble, despite still grieving, is what caused me to want to write the memoir. I wanted to honor my brother. I wanted to live my life as thoroughly as I could because he could not. I wanted to be the same partner to him as he had been to me way back at Robbie's house when he shared his love for me so unconditionally. Because despite as much of an individual as I had become, I am still his twin, and I always will be. So, nearly 5 years ago, a dear friend of mine said suddenly to me, without any hint or clue about why, she said, "Hank, I think you should write a book." Really? Okay, I don't get why, but thank you very much. And I sort of took the compliment, didn't understand it, but I said, I just filed it away. She said I was a good storyteller and that I had good stories to tell, but I didn't see why that was necessarily a good reason to write a book. Anyway, about 4 years ago, I heard a radio interview with a woman on NPR doing research on identical twins. The researcher commented that what most identical twins are most afraid of is losing their sibling. I had learned that even if she was correct, it's possible to survive losing one's twin and remain a healthy, positive member of the world. I wished I had had a way to give that message out to anyone who would benefit from it. And then about 3 years ago, I was taking courses at Temple University Lifelong Learning Program up in Ambler when I noticed a course being offered about learning to write a memoir. I immediately thought of Judith, who had suggested that I write a book. So I immersed myself in the process of learning to write a memoir, just in case that I might actually want to do it. And in the learning process, I realized that's exactly what I want to do. I couldn't stop writing even, as soon as I started, I just couldn't put it down. I realized that what I wanted was to write a story about losing my brother and how I managed to survive the grieving process. With encouragement from the mentor, the writing mentor, I used the time during the pandemic to complete the story. And now I get to share it with everybody here and hopefully a lot more people. If you still have a question about how I was able to survive the loss of my identical twin, my soulmate, my best friend, my answer is that the ability came from my twinship. It came from my desire to honor Chuck. It came from my devotion to Chuck. It came from my love and caring that we always had for each other and that I always will have forever. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Hank, for those beautiful, beautiful
My pleasure.
reflections and memory and bringing your brother's memory so beautifully into this room. Hank, and as I understand, Hank and Emma are going to stay a little bit for those at lunch who want to just continue a conversation with him. And as we said, if you have interest in getting a hold of this book, Stacy Salzman is a contact person at Beth Shalom, and she can make sure that you can find a way to get a copy. In the meantime, Steve, if you would like to lead us, we're going to invite you to help us conclude the service with Musaf, and we will invite you all to turn to page 155 in your Siddur and invite you to rise if you are able. As we continue first with Chatzi Kaddish, the Amidah begins, page 156b.
Thank you for the honor. Thank you for Yitkadal Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yalamad Yivrach Hirutei V'Amlich Malchutei B'chayechon V'mechon U'b'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael Bagalav Yizman Kariv V'yimeru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach V'yolam V'yomei Amaya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitbar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'rehu Li'ela min kol berchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran b'alma v'yimeru Amen. I'll take this one. Sorry. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ho'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol V'zocher hasdei avod, u'mevi goel livnei v'neihem, leman shemo be'ava. Melech ozer u'mofoked u'moshiach u'magen. Baruch atah Adonai, magen Avraham u'foked Sarah. Atah gibor li'olam Adonai, mechayei metim atah rav lehoshiach, morid hata'al. Mechalkel chayim bechesed, mechayei metim berachamim rabim, somech noflim v'rofech cholim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato, lishenei afar, michamocha ba'al gevurot, umido melach, Melech meimit u'mechayeh u'matzmiach Yeshua v'nemanata lachayot meitim Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hametim.
Motzi Asrafei Kodesh, Makishim Shimcha BaKodesh, Kakatuv Neviyecha v'Karazeh El Zevi Amar.
נעריצך ונקדישך כסוד שיח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב על יד נביאך וכרז זה ויאמר
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech haaretz kivod.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech haaretz kevodo. Kevodo, Mahale, Mahale, Olam, Aye Mekom kevodo. Kevodo, Mahale, Mahale, Olam, Aye Mekom kevodo. Kevodo, Male, Male, Olam, Meshor, Tav, Shoalim, Shoalim, Zelazeh, Aye Mekom Kevodo, Meshor, Tav, Shoalim, Shoalim, Zelazeh, Aye Mekom Kevodo, Liumataham, Baruch Yomeru,
Baruch Kavod Adonai Mimekamo.
Baruch Kevod Adonai, Mim Komo, Mim Komo, Hu Yifen Verachamim, Veyachonam, Amam Yachadim Shemo Shemo, Erev Avoker, Vechol Yom Tamid, Pamayim B'Ahava, Shema Omrim, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu,
Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, Vehu Yashmienu Berachamav. Shenit li'enei kol chai, Vehu Yashmienu Berachamav. Shenit li'enei kol chai, Liot lachem le'Elohim.
Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Uvdivrei Ani Adonai Elohechem, Uvdivrei Kadshecha Katuv Lemor.
Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Yitzion, Dor v'ador, Hallelujah.
Yimloch Adonai Le'olam Elohai Tzion Ledor Vador, Hallelujah. Ledor Vador Nagihi Gadlecha, Unetzach Netzachim Kedushatcha Nakdish, V'shivchacha Eloheinu Mipinu Lo Yamush Le'olam Va'ed, Ki El Melech Gadol V'Kadosh Ata, Baruch Ata Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh.
We continue privately through page 161. If you're still davening, continue. Those of you who have concluded, will join Steve as we turn ahead to as we conclude with Oseh Shalom, page 161.
Oseh Shalom Bimromav,
Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen.
Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael.
Page 181, Kaddish Shalem.
Yitkadav Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. Yalma Divrach Yirutevi Amlich Malchutei B'chayechon V'mechon V'chayedecho Beit Yisrael B'galav Yizman Kori V'yimeru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mivorach Leolam Ulam Me'amaya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'ishtabach V'yitbar V'trumam V'tnaseh V'tadar V'taleh V'talol Shemei Dekudesha Rechu Le'ela Min Kol Berchata V'shirata Tushbechata v'nechamata, damiron b'ilma v'yimeru, amen. Tit kabal, slotahon, uvutahon, dechol Yisrael, kadam avohon, v'yishmai v'yimeru, amen. Yehi shlomo rabba min shemayo, v'chayim oleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru, amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru, amen.
182.
Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemalkeinu, Michemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shetiru, Avotenu, Lefanecha, Eketoret Hasamim, Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu.
We'll continue Aleinu, page 183. We'll rise if we are able.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, lateit gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachoto adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, Umishchachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Kakatu b'torah techadonai yimloch leolam va'ed
V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom ahu
yeh Adonai echad u'shemo
We invite those in the process of mourning or observing a yahrzeit, both here in the Sisterhood Sanctuary and those who are on the Zoom to now continue with Steve, page 184, Kadisha Tom.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
B'yolma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. B'agala v'izman kori v'imru Amen.
Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mivorach v'olam amen amaya.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, v'yitalev, v'yitalol, shemei d'kudusha,
Brechu.
Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mrama, uyaseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Amen. We want to pause and again say thank you to all of you who are here for being part of services, those of you who are watching on the Zoom or on the live stream. We want to thank Hank Albert for sharing the story of his twin and of Chuck of blessed memory. And as we said, after those of you who are staying for lunch, I think you are invited to sit with Hank and continue the conversation. I want to thank Ivy for chanting Haftarah this morning. And I think Yona for being here with his grandmother during services. And thanks for all who participated in prayers, aliyot, etc. I don't have my sheet of announcements in front of me, but people are, so I won't say anything about it. What about the program on Sunday that Randy wants to tell us all about? A week from Sunday.
Yes, a week from Sunday, we're having a live Zoom with Israel. A member of Knesset is getting on Alon Tal, and then someone from the Pluralistic Watch Group to talk about Masorti issues in Israel. But the best part is that we have from Espresso, we have breakfast, so shakshuka, hummus, whatever. So please sign up so that we have your head count. I would say by Thursday, the latest. Please come out.
Rabbi, an announcement. We know in 2 weeks is Yofruf, coming up of your daughter and future son-in-law.
Yes, it is.
You are being careful, so you're safe and well coming up for the wedding. So no fist bumps for the rabbi, no hugs.
No, we can fist bump. I'm just keeping my mask on more frequently, as you see, for the next 2 weeks. Yes, and by the way, that ufruf is also Rebecca Pomerantz will become bat mitzvah, and that's where the most of the action will be around this wonderful young woman becoming bat mitzvah on the same Shabbat 2 weeks from today. Steve, you have something to announce.
Men's Club is having a closing dinner on Tuesday the 17th. Dinner will be an option, so if you're interested in dinner, please make sure you register for the dinner. It's going to be a wonderful speaker about the spy business in Israel, and I hope you can either watch on Zoom or you can come in person, but if you're coming for dinner, please sign up.
Thanks. And Chazan, we wanted to let us know about a musical program next Friday night, again to honor Israel.
Yes, next Friday there's going to be an Israeli Kabbalat Shabbat with all Israeli Shabbat melodies. And also the following Wednesday, May 18th, I'll be doing a class on the history of Israeli music from the early pioneers to today. So if you'd like to join, that's 7:30 on May 18th.
All right, so no other announcements other than those. Everyone is very happy. Steve, thanks for leading us in Musaf, and we're going to conclude on page 187.
Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'es nasa b'chefzo kol azai melech shemo nikra azai melech shemo nikra b'yacharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yiyeh b'tifara v'hu yiyeh b'tifara v'hu echad v'yein sheni laham shilo leach mira v'li reishit beli tachlit, velo ha'oz v'hamisra, velo ha'oz v'hamisra, vehu eli v'chai goali v'tzur chevli b'yetzara, vehu nisi umanosli menat kosi b'yom ekra, menat kosi b'yom ekra. Yado avkid brochim b'et ishan v'yahira v'im ruchi giviyati Adonai li v'lo yira Adonai li v'lo yira. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Yasher koach. Shabbat shalom. Oh, I know. I just decided. Thank you so much. Why not?
Shabbat shalom, Cantor.
Shabbat shalom.
My twin.
Your
Oh,
twin,
hey.
yes.
My twin.
There are people on it. I thought it was all blank screens.
Show me your shirt, Don. Right here.
Shalom,
You gotta
shalom.
look down here. You gotta look down here.
Yasher koach.
Friend was so, there you go. A friend
Gotta
was
get
so
closer.
inspired by my Devar. He gave me the shirt. I'd rather be in Israel right now. There you go.
Beautiful.
Yasher koach, Don. Yasher koach, Hagba.
Thank you, thank you.
Bill Wood, my man. There you go.
Hagba Robbie.
My evening minion brother.
You need a hat.
Sarah. No Judy
No
today?
Judy today. Carol Marvin, they're there.
Carol and Marvin, Shabbat Shalom. Stay
Shabbat shalom, you all. Hey, Robbie.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom,
Rubens are
Yvonne.
on. You gotta look down here.
Don
have
and
to
Robbie, are
get
you
him a
going
hat.
over for lunch?
Happy
That's what I
now.
say.
Marilyn and Robert. Oh, yeah.
There he is.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Don,
Here.
Don, are you going over to lunch?
Yeah.
Would go see Hank Albert, tell
Yeah.
him Bill Loy was on Zoom and says hello and Yasher koach.
Okay, yeah.
You grew up a block apart.
Will do.
Shabbat
Shalom,
Shalom,
Yvonne.
everybody.
Yvonne, tell your, it's a daughter, right? That Donald Duck says hello.
Rob, you need to get him a hat.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. See ya.
Rob,
Bye-bye.
It's Shabbos.
okay.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom, all
Shabbat
you.
shalom.
Danny and Rhoda, good Shabbos.
Steve.
I have it on.
Sora, good Shabbos.
Shabbos, Rob.
Yvonne, Patty and Al, Robbie, good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Love
Bill.
Hopefully I'll see some of you all tonight on Havdalah.
I hope to do it tonight. I hope.
Everybody should be done dinner and be back and from whatever they're doing. It's so late now, 8:35.
I know, it's really, really late.
What? Add in this rain?
And nowhere else to go.
My next door neighbor is having an outdoor baby shower.
They're in the shower. A shower in the shower?
Yeah. Isn't that a sin? An outdoor shower?
Hopefully they have tents.
A shame. I'm glad I dropped the gift off yesterday. It's really a shower.
It's a shame they didn't have a rain date, Patty.
No, the cars are all lined up.
That's a shame.
They have like these umbrellas, but in fact, I dropped the gift off yesterday because I figured we were gonna go to services and we woke up and saw this. I said, forget it. But they
Just
still
wanna
have
go
all the,
today in
they have, the
person.
cars are all lined up, Robbie, the cars are all lined up. I can see
know.
out back from one room. They have these like umbrella tents, but some of them blew down already.
Yeah, it's very windy out.
Oh, windy out.
Yeah.
And they wanted to have it outside because it's, because
COVID.
the mother to be
Shalom.
doesn't want to be inside.
I can't say blame her.
No, I don't. All I can say is I'm glad I dropped the gift off already. All right.
Good Shabbos, everybody. Take
Good
care.
Shabbos. See you later.
Stay well, Sora.
Good Shabbos, Sora.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Did anyone hear Randy Sable's announcement? No.
I think it was about the brunch next week, but I couldn't hear her.
I don't know what the announcement was.
I think
Yeah,
it was
we
about
couldn't
the
hear.
brunch when
She was talking about the Israel breakfast.
the Knesset brunch, I think.
Yeah, that's.
What was Steve's announcement, Patty?
I couldn't hear. I don't know. I can talk to them. I talked to. I can give them a call later.
That'd be good because I couldn't hear what he said.
No, I couldn't hear, but I can call later.
Thank you.
I
And
don't
then
know.
just let me know. Either call me or text me.
If if it's anything important.
Okay.
All right. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. I'm so glad that we have this availability online.
Yeah. All right. I'm trying to leave.
And next Friday is going to be Israeli also.
Shabbat shalom.
We wanted to do it yesterday, but we were supposed to have a kid service yesterday. But it was canceled, so I was going to do, it didn't work out, so I'm doing it next week. Service is all Israeli music. So wait, so that's the one that is Wednesday? Two separate ones. Oh my gosh. No, one on Friday, it's just Israeli Shabbat service. And that is what? This coming Friday. This coming Friday. Yeah. And that's just the today Shabbat. So it's this coming Friday. Yeah, and that's just Kabbalah Shabbat here. Here, this room, yeah. And then the Wednesday after that, on the 18th is the class. Yes. So, looking forward to seeing you. Okay.
Okay, go to lunch?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think, by the way, another thing that I did mention, that I questioned him, that bothers me also for years, that I always receive a calendar, a big one, you know, that you have in the web, from Chabad. Yom Ha'atzmaut is not even listed. Yom HaShoah. I mean, yes, Yom HaShoah. Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom HaZikaron are not listed.
Really?
And I asked him about that. I wanted, for a long time, I've talked to people about it. And they always said, whoever said to me, why don't you call the rabbi? I never wanted to actually call, but since I was there and since this was a perfect opportunity, not in front of the people, but later on I walked over to him and I asked him, I said, you know what, on my calendar, it never shows it. And why? And I got another answer and I was like too upset.
What did he say? What is the reason?
They're not, it's as if it's not quite, can't say precisely, you know, but the idea was that it's like they're not accepting it quite yet, whichever. And how did he say it? Why? Oh, so I asked him, I said, why? Is it because of the Mashiach? And he said, no, but he said it had to do with orthodoxy and whatever that, and he started talking about Ben-Gurion and as if they were, something is missing, the Charidut, whatever.
Right. That's crazy. Yeah, understandably.
Okay.
All right.
I'm supposed to come to Bet Shalom.
Yeah, I'm happy you're coming too. It's in the fiction.